Okay, so there might be two recordings, okay? So sorry about that. That's never happened to me. All right. So we were starting to talk about point groups. I do have a mistake on my sheet. I want my points to all have a description of BLD, okay? So let's go over, we're going to create a point group. I'll pick up right where we were. We're going to do a new point group. And I'm going to go to basic point. We're going to call this group building. And we are going to include all points that have a raw description of BLD, okay? So like I said, on my sheet for 70 and 71, I might have BLG. I want you to use BLD, okay, for everything. All right, is everybody good with that? So I'm gonna go ahead and apply that. If you look at your point summary, there won't be anything in there. So I'm gonna go ahead and okay that. So you should see a new point group here. So as we start to enter points, we should see them automatically come in on that point group. So hopefully that'll work. All right, so we're gonna start out instrument at 1, backsite 3, okay? So I'm gonna go over here to points. We're gonna do a manual. And you can set up some things in here if you are just entering points, for instance, for your name, what we could do for the format. Let's see, point creation. If you come to your point creation tool, you don't have to do this, but what you could do is come in here and you could set your points up to automatic, and then you could put the word BLD in here, and every time you enter the point, it'll automatically place that. The problem with that is if you forget to do that later, it's going to keep putting the same description on every time you put a point, so you may have to go back and edit it. So I'm going to leave everything the way we have it. So, but I'm going to do a manual, and I'm going to do a side shot. We're going to be able to do multiple side shots. So the first time we're setting up at point 1, backsighting point 3, so that would be like this right here. And if this guy's in your way, you can just kind of move him. All right, so make sure your instrument's at 1 and your backsighting 3. So we have 2 points to put in there, 70 and 71. So I'm going to put in 41.5214. Enter. 128.76. Enter. Should be asking me for the number. We're going to call this 70. And the description, make sure you use BLD for building. Go ahead and hit enter. Should put the point in, ask me for the next point, 47.0911, enter. And then 252.65 for the distance. And then this will be 0.71. And then it'll be BLD. Okay. So we should have just those 2 points from that point. All right. So you can go ahead and hit enter again, and that'll kill that. How are we doing? Does everybody follow me so far? I'm going to check my email real quick just to make sure that somebody didn't get lost out by that. Is everybody doing all right?
Still here.
All right, good. That's what I want to hear. All right, is everybody following so far? So we should have 70 and 71 in, just like that diagram shows. Any questions? All right, so we're now going to go back and go to points, miscellaneous, manual. Grab your little side shot tool, and we're going to this time click on the line from 3, backsight 1. So you flipped your location. So now your green backsight tool is on 1 and your instrument is at 3. So we got 3 shots to do there. 293.5039. And then we've got 136.11. This is going to be 72. And it'll be BLD. And again, you can automate things. Like I said, we could do that so we don't have to keep typing in all those numbers, but that's just a way we can do it. All right, so I'm going to put my 327, 09, 39, 119.71. The distance, this is 73, and BLD. And we have one more point to put in, and that is going to be 343.4116. That's minutes and seconds. 165.42. And the number is 74, and the description is BLD. And you can hit enter twice. So you should have your points in place now. I'm going to close that tool. And we should see those points, so we can now go up and grab lines. And those lines we're going to do by point object: 70, 71, 72, 73. Then I'm going to hit enter and then escape. And then I'm going to do line by point object 70 to 74. And then hit enter. Okay, how's that coming? Are we good? Everybody okay?
Just a quick question. I know if you wanted to change the symbology on those buildings, I know they're fine the way they are, but what was the way to do that again?
Well, you would do it through a point group essentially. Okay.
Okay, so you'd right click on the point group and
yeah, and do you notice right now, do you notice your point group has a little caution symbol on it?
Yes.
All right. The reason is because this point group has had points added to it, but it doesn't recognize them yet. So what you have to do is update that point group. So what we're going to do is just click on the point group building, right click, and there's an update. So we're going to update that. Those points are now on that point group. So if you had a setting for your point group, your style, it should update to that style. Now you may have to do an override because sometimes for some reason it got locked into a basic mode, so it's going to stay that way. So we just override them with the point groups. Does that answer your question, Dave?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So if you want, what we can do is we've got a corner here, and we're going to assume that this corner is parallel to that line and that this corner is parallel to that line. So I'm going to use an offset command. So I'm going to show you how to do this. I want you to, if you have an endpoint on your OSNAPs, I'm going to turn my endpoint off and I'm going to set it to node just to show you how we can use this. We're going to go into the offset command, just type in O for offset. And we're going to do what's called a through point offset. So T for through. Select this line and notice it kind of follows you. Just come down here and select that line, that object right there. And then I'm going to do this object right here and it follows me, and I'm going to offset it through that point. When you get done, hit escape. So I was using an AutoCAD OSNAP. You can do it by point numbers, but it's a little bit kinky because you have to go in and go to your transparent tool. So sometimes it's easier not using those things. So now I can just do a simple trim, select that and select that, and then hit enter. Okay. All right, so I'm going to show you a little bit more about point groups, and then we're going to start to get into some intersections, some other point issues, which are pretty cool in these tools. So we're going to create what's called a blank point group, which is going to include all the point groups, but it's going to have no settings. And if this thing gets placed above point groups, then it should hide them. So this is kind of a neat tool. This is a way of doing it without doing layers. So you might want to do a zoom extent so you can see everything. And we're going to go over to point groups, right click, and we're going to do new point group. We're going to call this point group the blank point group because it's basically like think of it like a frozen layer. So it's going to freeze everything that's below it. And for the styles, we don't want to show up anything. So there's a style setting there called none for the point style. And there's also a style setting there called none for the point label style. So that's the way you're going to freeze things out. Okay. We are going to include every point that we create. So under the include tab, down below, there's an include all points. And you'll notice if you go to the point list, everything that you have in here is showing up there, no matter what their description names are. Now we may have to do an override when we do this. In fact, I'll tell you what, I'm going to just go ahead. We're going to do the override right now because that way it may or may not work. So I'm going to go ahead and set the override style up to that, apply that, and okay it. And probably everything in your drawing just disappeared except for your line work. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we did is basically froze the points. If you notice on your point group list right here, blank is on the top, building is below, existing monuments and control, okay? So if we're done looking at certain things, we can hide everything out. So what we're gonna do is just click on properties of the point groups and you get this list. What this allows you to do is swap the order of what's happening here. So notice if I put control, click on control and promote it to the top, it's now sitting above the blank, apply that and okay that, and you should see now you see your control points, but nothing else. So anything below the point, the blank point group is being hidden, more or less, even though they're still there. And if I take and right click on that, go to properties, and I put existing monument above, what I now should see is my existing monuments and my control points, but not my building points. This is a really slick way of working with points, and it allows you to not have to mess with a gazillion different layers. I can keep everything on the same layer, but I can handle it this method, okay? Is that working for everybody?
Yep.
Okay, good.
That is really cool.
Isn't that?
My goodness.
All right, so that's what a lot of people never pick up on with points, okay? Once you learn that little trick, that is like the best thing in the world. Okay, so we're going to create another point group, okay? And we're going to call this set monuments. So we're going to start utilizing some other tools to set monuments. So I'm going to go to point groups, new. I'm going to call this set monument. Okay. And I'm going to create a new one. Let's see, we're going to go to the style, and I want you to create a copy. And let's see, for the information, we'll call this basic 2 if you want, that's fine. we're going to go to marker, and you should find one in here called iron pin. I think they got it in. You might have to scroll in. Oh, I gotta click on this symbol here. These are actually blocks down here. So there's all kinds of different blocks. There's trees and there's benchmarks. There should be one in there called iron pin right there. And it kind of looks like a circle. So we're just going to use that. So we're going to apply that. Okay, that. So we created a new style, called it Basic 2. And we'll leave the point number and description on. So we are going to go out and we're going to set different things. We're going to set spikes. We're going to set PK nails. We're going to set iron pins. Okay. So for the include here, we're going to go to the include tab. With raw description matching, we're going to set the word set, and then we're going to put a star after it. So what that means is it'll take the word SET or the letters SET, and anything after that it'll pick up. So if we have set IP or set spike or set PK nail, it'll pick up on all of those. All right. So this is kind of cool. Now that star can be dangerous too, because if you have something else out there that has set, that could end up on your point group even though you don't want it to be. All right. So we'll handle that here in a minute. So go ahead and notice also if you go to your point list, there's nothing that matches that at this point, okay? So we're including that. We're going to apply this, and we're going to okay this. Notice we've created another point group there called set monuments. All right, so we're going to look at different tools. And if we go back to this diagram here, I have a PK nail here that I want to set by utilizing a bearing and a distance. So I'm going to set at 101, and then I'm going to shoot a bearing and a distance to establish that. Uh-oh, I'm getting an unstable. You guys still with me?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
I just got an unstable internet. That might have been what happened on me before. I've never had that before, by the way, so hopefully that won't bug out on me. So also, if you notice 106, I just have a bearing and a bearing. So what we're going to do here is what's called a bearing-bearing intersection. So you basically can set up a known point, shoot a bearing, and set up at another point and shoot a bearing. And where those two bearings intersect will give you this position. So this is called a bearing-bearing intersection or a direction-direction. Notice for 102, I have a distance and I have another distance, but I don't know anything about the angles, but I can let the two intersections happen there. And so what we're going to do is use that concept. We're going to use that's called a distance-distance intersection. And then the last one, what we have is a bearing that we're going to intersect with a distance. So these are common ways of doing things, and these are called intersections, and surveyors use these all the time. Okay. So the first one we're going to do is create a point by bearing and distance. Then we're going to do bearing, bearing. Then we're going to do distance, distance. And then we're going to do a bearing distance. Okay. So these are all located under this group right here called intersections. And notice you have a lot of different types: direction, direction, distance, 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 direction. But the first one we need to do is up here in the miscellaneous, and that is called create a point by bearing. Okay, so we're going to go miscellaneous, create point, bearing. So it wants you to select the starting point. Now, you have a node OSNAP already set up. You could actually just snap to that point, or you can come over here to this guy, click on the point object, transparent, and then just click on the point itself. And it knows what you're talking about. But we should get the little instrument sitting right on the point, and what it's looking for now is the bearing. So the first thing it wants to know is the quadrant, and notice on my sheet I have a quadrant there of southwest. So you can click in the southwest quadrant, or you can type in 3 and hit enter, either way. Now we enter the bearing, 83.0748. Enter, And then the distance is 250.80. Enter. So it should be asking you for a point number. We're going to call that 107. Enter. And the description is going to be set PK nail. Enter and enter again. And then you can escape. You should now see a point out there. Okay. Notice
So
over, go ahead.
You're setting points on the point group that you created. So it puts the points on the most recently created point group?
No, it puts it on the point group based on the description.
Okay.
Now, here's another thing. It puts it always, it's always in the all points point group. You can't get rid of that. It also occurs in the blank point group. So do you notice over here, I've got two things I need to update?
Right.
All right, so I'm gonna update my monuments and I'm gonna update my blank. Now, you might notice this still retained its original marker. Okay, that's because we have to override that. So I'm gonna go ahead and in my monuments properties, set monuments properties, I'm gonna override the style and I'm gonna override the label. Do you notice the symbol now is set? Is that working for everybody?
Yeah, I think that's why I was confused about where the points were going.
Yeah, the point was actually not there until we updated it, but it wasn't, it was also in, it's always in the all points point group, okay? So you can never get rid of a point from the all points point group. They're always going to be there. And you can't even actually edit the all points point group. Okay? Does that make sense now?
Yes, thank you.
So we're going to draw a line now from, point 101 to 107. So we're going to do a create line by point object. Click on 101, click on 107, and there's my boundary line. Then you can hit the escape key twice. Okay? So that's a very common kind of thing of doing with points. We did that with lines, remember? We did lines by bearing. Now you can do points by bearing, okay? So it's a little bit of a difference. All right, so we're going to now do a bearing intersection, which they call an direction intersection. So this is a cool tool. You pick the point, you pick the bearing, and then it actually allows you to do an offset left or right from that bearing. We're not going to do any offsets, but you can, like, so if you're doing a right-of-way, you don't have to be on the right-of-way. You can just know that you're 25 feet left or right of where you're doing your intersection from. So that's a pretty cool tool. But what we're going to do is go ahead and do points, intersection, direction. Okay. So it wants me to specify a point. I'm going to come over here and use that point object tool, select point 105. Notice you get that, you should get a yellow X there. It says, okay, that's the point you're coming from. We are going to specify a bearing. And that bearing that I'm giving you is a northeast bearing 850248. So you can click in the northeast quadrant and enter the bearing 85.0248. You should see a little yellow arrow that is pointing in that direction now. And it should be asking you for an offset. So if you wanted to offset to the left of that line, you would be negative offset distance. If you want to offset right, it would be a positive. We're not going to offset anything, so we're just going to hit enter for a 0 offset. Now it wants us to select the second point. Come over to your transparent tool, select 107. Okay, this is when we get problems. All right, Hopefully, did your guys work or did it bug out on you?
Mine's working.
Mine's not. Okay. Did anybody else's work?
Mine did not.
Okay. All right. That sometimes happens. Okay. So I'm going to tell you, let's just everybody escape out of here. All right. It just does that sometimes. So I'm going to go ahead and escape again. We're going to try it again. I'll tell you what we're going to use, because sometimes I found this to work better. Let's just make sure that your OSNAP is set to node. Node will work fine for you. That might be my problem actually, but I'm going to leave it set to node. We're going to try this again. Okay. These tools can be kind of kinky, as you're seeing, so sometimes you got to work with them a little bit. All right, so we're going to try this again. Intersections, direction. You should just be able to click on that and that node will pop up. So that's the same thing as point number. Go ahead and select bearing again. We're going to select the first quadrant and we're going to hit 85.0248. Enter. For the offset, we're going to do a 0 offset. We're going to come over and hit this point with its node. Again, this is a northeast bearing. Now you can actually shoot it northeast, but I know northeast is the same thing as southwest, so I'm going to click down in the southwest quadrant. And I'm going to give it a bearing. Oh, geez. Mine's just bugged out again. Hold on a minute. All right, let's try this one more time. This is it usually doesn't work this hard, but I'm going to try this again. Click on that. Show it a bearing. Okay, 85. Hopefully you guys are not having the same problems I am. Come over here, click this point. Oh, wait a minute. I did it again. One more time. Hopefully this works. All right, bearing. First quadrant. 85.02. It's usually not this hard, guys. Partially what I'm not doing is watching the screen. So, all right, offset is 0. Starting point here, bearing, southwest quadrant, 58.18. No offset. You should see a point there. When it asks you for the point number, call it 106. If it's asking you for a description, call it set spike. Hit enter, escape, okay? You should have a spike that's set at that point. Did everybody get that to execute finally? Shouldn't be that hard. Anybody questions? All right, so we'll notice that our monuments need to be updated. Update your monuments. Update your blank. So you'll get that a lot in Civil 3D. And notice our symbol should look good. I'm going to go ahead and connect a line by point objects, 105, 106, and 107. So you're actually seeing a lot of good things happening that shouldn't be happening, but they do sometimes in Civil 3D. That can be frustrating, by the way, very frustrating. Is everybody okay with that so far?
Yeah.
All right. So we're now we're going to try this one over here. Let me just explain this real quick. This is called a distance intersection. Now, basically, what you're doing is, think of it this way. You have a giant compass with its points sitting at 101 and it's opened up to a value of 198, whatever. It's swinging an arc, okay? You're doing the same thing with a compass here at that setting of radius, and you're swinging an arc. So what you're doing is intersecting two arcs. So because of that fact, you have the potential to get a solution here. You also could get a solution over here. So Civil 3D is going to ask you to select which solution you want. Okay, so we're gonna have to watch that. And that's, again, this one may not execute real nice at first. Until you do this a couple of times, just understand you're gonna get 2 solutions with this. You could potentially get 2 solutions with this as well. Okay, so we're gonna do this distance first, and then we're gonna do this distance direction, all right? Okay, so zoom out so you can see both of these points, the lower point and the upper point. And again, we're gonna use our OSNAP setting set to node because that seems to be executing much better than my transparent commands are today. So I'm gonna go to points now, create points by intersection. I'm gonna do a distance intersection. So for the radial point location, it doesn't matter whether you use the top or the bottom. I'm gonna use the top first. And it gets me that X and it wants to know the distance. This distance is going to be 198.22. For the second radial location, it's going to give me that. And I'm going to do 271.36. You get 2 green X's. Okay, there's your 2 solutions. So you're just going to pick the one you want. And it says, okay, tell me the point number. We're going to call this 102. And we're going to call this set IP. And you can then hit escape. And you should see your point come in. Did everybody get that one to execute? Are we doing all right, guys?
Yeah.
Okay. So notice again, you normally get 2 solutions. You could have 0 solutions if your distances don't intersect, and you could potentially have 1 solution if you happen to have a tangent situation with your distances, but that almost never happens, okay? So 99% of the time, you're gonna get 2 solutions. So notice again, we have to update set monuments and we have to update blank. So I'm gonna go ahead and update, I'm gonna update set monuments, I'm gonna update blank. And we're gonna go ahead and construct a line from 101 to 102 and then 102 to 103. So I'm gonna line by point object. And then you can hit the escape key twice. Okay, so we have 1 more point to establish utilizing this concept. We're going to do a bearing distance type of intersection this time. So we're going to go over here. We're going to do intersections. This is called a direction distance. So notice it's asking me for the direction of the radial point first. So it wants to know where the distance is. So the distance is being measured from spike 105. And that distance, according to what we measured, is 233.93. And then it wants to know the bearing point. So we're going to come here for the bearing point. Choose bearing as your option. We are in northwest bearing, so we're going to go ahead and tell it either quadrant 4, you can click in the northwest direction and then key in that bearing, 88.4633. It wants to know a offset, just enter 0 for the offset. Click on the green solution that's closest to your site, and that should be 0.104. Description is set IP. And you can then escape. All right, hopefully that executed well for everybody. Again, go ahead and update your set monuments, update your set monuments, update your blank. And we're going to ultimately now go ahead and do create line by point object. Again, click, click, and click. Okay, so there's our bearings. There's our exterior boundaries now located. I'm not saying you're going to utilize all these little tools all the time, but the more you get into Civil 3D, there's all these tools that are available to you. So you need to be able to take advantage of them. Okay. Any questions?
I've got to bug out here for my meeting.
Okay. Well, hopefully I will get the information set up for you. Okay. Hopefully my videos will work. Okay. So, and I'll get those posted as soon as I can. All right. Everybody else okay with me so far? Any
Yeah.
questions? Shelly, you're doing good?
Yep.
What was the last point command you used to create those points? Was it direction distance?
This one here for 104 McAllister.
Yes.
I used, yeah, I think you're right. It was a direction distance. Okay. It's kind of weird. They call it direction distance, but they ask for distance first. So you kind of got to watch
Right.
that sometimes. It drives me nuts. It's kind of like, why did the programmers do it that way? You know?
It
You
seems
gotta-
like a lot of the commands are basically backwards is what you would think it is.
Sometimes they are, you know, and I think, you know, the thing is that Civil 3D is wonderful, but the problem is I think it's gone through so many incarnations and they've never really addressed a lot of those issues, you know what I mean?
Right.
So it's kind of like you kind of got to deal with the nuances of it after you do it. But once you start using it, yeah. And you know, we don't use these things all the time.
Right. Right.
But you know, it's good to know. And for instance, what we did up here, where we took these two bearings and intersected them, that's the
Mhm.
same thing as a fillet with a 0 radius. If you have two lines, so you can do, you know, an extend or a trim. That's really a bearing intersection.
Right. That makes
So a lot of
sense.
these things can be done different ways, but you really do want to pick up on what we're doing over here with points, point groups, and all of that. Those are the key things. Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely the key things. So I'm going to show you right now. Everybody update. You still need to get 104 in there?
Yeah. So the offset 0. All
Yep.
right. Oh, why? I zoomed out and then it took away my points.
I know it'll do that, but
Okay. Yeah, I got it.
okay, you got it. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, it'll do it. You got to watch the zooms on that because those things are like virtual little things and they disappear when you zoom in or out. Yeah, you're right. Did you get your point in though?
Yep. I got
Okay.
it.
Go ahead and update your point groups as well. Okay. Is everybody ready then? So we're going to look at, we don't want to see the control point group anymore, so we don't care about that. I do want to see existing monuments and I do want to see set monuments. So I'm going to go over here to point groups, right click to properties. I'm going to click on point blank rather, and I can either bring blank above control or control below it. So either one, if I click on that, don't go all the way up, just go up one level. So you should see monuments set, monuments existing, and blank is in between when I apply that and okay that. Notice control group disappears. Okay, so if I don't need to see those, I don't care about that. All right. And let's do something too. Let's go to the panorama. If you click on the all points point group and right click to edit points, you'll notice every point that we've created is in that list now, and they will always be in that list. Okay, so you'll always have those availability if you need to see those. Okay. Any questions on that? All right, I'm going to show you a couple more point object kind of routines, and we'll talk about some editing tools a little bit, and then we should be done. So we're going to be, there's a lot, trust me, there's a lot of different ways you can create points. We're just only looking at a few of them. So, All right, so we are going to now go to this schematic, this lecture, second one. And what I'm going to do is establish a point at 50 and at 51. And there's a tool called along an object, along a line or along an arc. So this is kind of a cool tool. You can just tell it what line you want to do it on, and then you can just tell it the distances, okay? And this one I'm going to establish at the midpoint of this line. And then I'm going to use those points to establish kind of offsets, if you will. So we're going to establish 50, 51, and 52. And then we're going to create those that line work based on those kind of guys, okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a few settings here to make it a little bit simpler. What I want to do is, if this tool is not open, I'm just going to go up here and click on, we're going to do what's called along or on a line. Actually, there's two options there. If you do along a line, it allows me to give it a distance along that. If you do it on a line, what it's going to do is do it at endpoints. So we really want to use the one that's called along a line or a curve. So if this tool pops up, which is really what I want to get to, what I want to do is set a few settings in there just to make it a little bit simpler for me. So what I'm going to do is go to the points creation section. Now, if you don't do this, you can also set this up after the fact. So I'm going to leave my prompt elevations to none. My prompt point names is none, but I'm going to set my descriptions up to automatic. And for the default description, I'm going to tell it to place for me set IP, because I'm going to be doing that a couple of times and I don't necessarily want it to do that, you know, keep typing it in. So automatic for the point, prompt for point description, and it's going to default put that value in set IP for me. Okay. And then under point identity, and I don't have to do this, but we're going to start with our point numbering at 50, and we're going to tell it to do what's called sequential. So what it's going to do for me is once I start at 50, then it'll go 51, then 52, and then I don't have to enter all that information. Okay. So it still should be asking me to select a line, arc, or polyline. So I'm going to just go ahead and select this line. Now make sure you select it closer to the left end than the right end, because that's the point it's going to measure from. So if I click on that guy right there, you see the X, and it wants to know the distance. I want to go out 150 feet. You should see point 50 came in for you automatically, and it had the value set. The next distance is going to be another 150 out, so we have to type in 300 because it's measuring from where we started. And I'm done with that routine, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the escape key twice. Did everybody get that to show up for them? Did that work? And notice the beauty on that is it incremented those automatically for me, and it set that value for me, so it was a lot less for me to have to deal with when I'm typing in things. Is everybody okay with that? All right. So we're going to do one more manual location, but we're going to snap to the midpoint of this line. So I'm just going to go over here. By the way, you can grab some of these tools here. So if you want to just open that up, you can just hit manual. And then it wants me to know the location. I'm going to do a shift, right click, midpoint, snap to the midpoint of that line, and then hit the escape key. And I can close this box. I think we're pretty much done with that now. How are we doing? Is everybody okay? Okay. So is everybody there? You guys still with me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to update our point groups. Update your point group. Update your blank. Notice those go to the symbol that we want. So let's check our OSNAP setting. Make sure that we're still set to node. Okay. And you can turn any other OSNAP off. Just make sure you're using node. Node is very convenient when you're using points, by the way. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold this bearing, and we're going to run that bearing through each one of these points to define these lines real quick. Okay. So I'm going to go in just the normal AutoCAD offset command. I'm just going to type in O and hit enter. Again, I'm going to do that through option, T, and then you just pick that object, and then pick that point, and then pick that object, and pick that point, pick that object, pick that point, and pick that object, and pick that point. So we're now able to use a combination of line work and also point groups. So I'm just going to do an extend command, EX for extend. I'm going to select that line and that line and this line for my boundaries, and then hit enter, and then just come back, pick it, pick that, pick that, pick that. Should extend it right where it needs to be, and then I'm going to do a shift and trim that off. So you should now see that your line work is coming through those points. We held that bearing, which is like really key, but we're running it through that point. Okay, you guys all getting that to work?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so let me ask you guys a question. How would I put a point here and a point here, since I don't have points up here, if I wanted to place those points? How could we do?
Just put a manual point, right?
Yeah, and what would you use though? You have to be careful, right?
Like endpoint or something?
Yeah, I might
Not
use
sure.
endpoint or intersection, right? So, yeah, endpoint would work great. Now, here's the thing you got to be really careful with. If endpoint was like not hitting that line, right? I could get the point above it or below it. So intersection might be better because whether this line is hitting that or not, it's still going to put me at the intersection. So yeah, but manual would be the way to go with that. And I could just set that up and run with it. All right, you guys getting this to all make sense now? So they have endpoints when you get into point creation. There's a lot of really cool little tools here. This one that's called station offset object is kind of neat. You can just create a station kind of on the fly. And so for instance, if I want to turn this line into a quick station, I can just click on that, tell it that's 0, and it's increasing that direction. If I want to go left, it's one way. If I want to go right. So left is always negative in the Civil 3D world, and right is always positive. We're going to see that when we get into alignments. I'm going to show you guys how to do that a little bit more. Okay. So let's take a look at some point style issues real quick, just to make sure we're all okay on that. The point styles, if you click on monuments, right click, properties. So remember, you have two things that are affecting that point. You have your point styles right here. So there's already pre-created point styles for you, all right? Or as we saw, we can create our own, and you should see the ones that you created. We created 2. We created what was called basic 1. I actually have another copy in there. I don't know where that came from. So I have a basic that was already in there, but you can also set them none. So sometimes periodically, if I don't want to see these, I can just change those up to any value I want. Also for the labeling, they have pre-selected labels in there. So for instance, for monuments right now, we have set to point number and description, but if we change that to northing and easting and applied that, it should notice now everything's reading out in northing and easting just for that point group. and not for any of the other point groups. So point groups are really, really, really the way to go when you get into these. Also remember, you can take those guys because you have those grips. I can take the grip label and I can move the grip label out like that. And then you have the symbol itself, but be careful. Remember, unless these are locked, you can pull that guy out and you can have problems with that, right? So a lot of times with labeling on points, I'm probably just going to use point number the most, but sometimes I want to see my descriptions as well. I very rarely will use this, but sometimes I do use a northing and easting kind of setting. Also, does anybody notice, by the way, that the northing and easting is only set to, in this case, 2 decimal places? So also within those settings, if I right click on here, I can look at the style on that, the label style. Let's see, where's the point label style? Yeah, well, it's in there, but if I edit the label style, I can change the value to 4 decimal places, 3, just like we've been dealing with the bearing and distance type of information, okay? On this case, since I pulled this guy out, if I want to reset him, there's 2 ways to do it. I can just bring that guy back up, or I can just right click and say reset the label, and it'll bring it back to where it was normally. All right, let's look at some of the editing. There's a lot of different edits that you can do within points. If we go to the all points point group and right click, notice you can edit points, which I've already shown you to do. So if we go to the edit points, it opens up the panorama. You have the ability of changing, as we said, point numbers, northing, easting values, or descriptions, or any other thing that would be in there, okay? Now, we couldn't change a northing and an easting value if the point was locked, but I think we can still get to the point number and the control and the descriptions. So those are kind of important. So make sure you utilize that panorama. It's very important when you're dealing with points. Here's some other cool tools in here besides the lock unlock. Now that's actually locking the point group up, but I can do like zoom twos and all kinds of stuff. Let me let's do a zoom to. What this does is that zooms to that point group specifically. But let's say I'm looking for point 50, and I don't know where 50 is, especially because I can't see, I don't have my point numbers on here. So what I can do is go to the point group, edit the points, click on 50 and right click, and notice there's a zoom to point 50. And when I do that, that's actually right, that's point 50 right there in the middle of the screen. So that's a really cool tool. Let's go to edit points again. Within this, you're going to have a lot of other tools you can do. So for instance, if I click on a point, notice I can renumber it. I can change a datum. I can grab an elevation from the surface. So if I have a surface out there and it doesn't have an elevation, it'll calculate the elevation of where that point is, and it'll use that elevation. So right now I don't have an elevation. If I had a surface there, it could grab that from me. I'm going to show you guys how to do that later on. You can do description keys. We'll talk about description keys later on, but if you use a description key, then it allows you to place things on layers and with symbols and all kinds of good stuff. Datum shift would allow you to move, like say you were at a base elevation for your datum of elevation 400 and you wanted to move everything to 800, that would allow you to do that. So in other words, it adds it or subtracts it. The other thing you can do with points, and you got to be careful, I don't think they have a routine in here, but there's a way to rotate them. So sometimes when you've got your points in here, they're on the wrong rotation because you started out with an assumed bearing. You can do rotations with points, but you got to be really, really careful when you rotate points. That's the one thing I would say very, very much be careful with. Okay. So you got to kind of watch that. Also, and probably one of the bigger deals with points is you can delete them really easily. So if I just click on that guy and I hit the delete key, he's gone. All right. So be really careful. And in fact, I get to the point, if you've got any kind of points that you just deleted, for instance, like I just did, I would undo it back right away. But if you're really concerned about any of your points, just lock them. That way you won't have any issues. So I could simply go in, edit my points. Again, I could just hit that point, go down to the bottom, shift it, and just lock them all. It doesn't hurt to lock your points because it just keeps them from ever moving around on you. And that's always important. Okay. All right, so we're going to be working with points on our next lab. I'm going to have you do things that are similar to what we did in this. We're actually going to use more side shot type of points on ours and constructing a plat based on that kind of stuff. Now, what a lot of people do with points is they insert them or they import them. And we will talk about that later, but there is a way to, under here, I believe, there's a way to insert or import points when you get into this. So we're going to take a look at that. I just wanted to show you quickly here before we get done also. I think I mentioned this, but you can create points from what's called a block. So if you have blocks in your drawing, you can convert those into Kogo points. You can convert points from what are called land desktop. So land desktop is an older, I believe I explained this, but the Civil 3D came from a program called land desktop. Those points, the graphics will open up in Civil 3D, but it won't recognize those points. So if you have an older drawing that has land desktop points in it, you can convert them using that. You can also convert AutoCAD points. I think they also have, let's see, do they have Sofdesk points in there? Yeah, Sofdesk is another point type block. Those were another, that was an older style too. That was actually, Sofdesk predated land desktop. So you could even have files that are old Sofdesk and it'll convert those into points for you. So there's a lot of really good tools here. Okay. So any questions that you guys have? Sorry about some of that stuff that worked. Oh, let me show you one other tool real quick. It's called Automatic. Automatic, I would be careful using this. I'm not sure how this is going to work for us right now, but let's try this. Automatic. What you do is you just select the lines that you want to put a point on. Now it's going to put points on both sides. So if I select that line and that line and that line and that line, it'll put points on there automatically for me at endpoints. But notice I got duplications down here too. So that's not necessarily a good tool to use. Be careful if you use automatic because you can get duplicate points. And so that's a cool little tool. So if you did everything with line work, you could just have it create all of the points for you. So again, there's a lot of different things you can do. But point groups, those are the key, and utilizing this blank kind of thing concept. Any questions before we get out of here? I think that's pretty much all I wanted to cover today. Anybody questions at all?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, good. Shelley,
I'm
you
good.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect. All right, so what I would suggest, if you go back to, let's see if we go back to here, in your book, they cover a lot of the stuff, okay? He does a pretty good job of describing it. He goes into a lot, the author goes into a lot more of the point creation tools. And, you know, again, we didn't look at all of these. We looked at most of them, but those are some of the major ones you use. A lot of people don't use this intersection stuff anymore. That was really big on the surveying at one time. There's different ways of doing things now. But he does also talk quite a bit about editing, so you might want to look at that. I would suggest, you know, reading pages 2.1 through 2.56, and then he's got a couple tutorials. Now you have to go out and download the tutorial files. from their webpage, but that's easy to find. So if you want to get a little bit more on this in the tutorials, there's page 57 through 75. You'll find that information. Okay. All right. Any questions then?
No.
Okay. So I guess then we are going to be done for today, and I will see everybody on Wednesday. I'll get these 2 lectures. Hopefully both lectures worked. I'm really sorry about all the issues I had this morning, but it happens sometimes. So hopefully this was good for everybody. And then, like I said, we'll be working on a lab that's going to be dealing with a similar kind of thing. And we're going to be utilizing points as we go on. Not exclusively, because you use a lot of different tools. I mean, you can see we're using both line tools and other types of tools. So we do that routinely in Civil 3D. So it's not just a point issue. Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop the share for everybody, and we will see everybody on Wednesday. If you have questions, let me know. I'll be around today, tomorrow, and then I'll see you guys on Wednesday at 8 o'clock.